Just a farmer's son. You? We need to talk.
Just a farmer's son, the principal laughed as the entire school watched Jaden stand there in silence. Some students laughed, others pulled out their phones. Jaden said nothing, just picked up his backpack and walked away. But the next morning, everything changed. 10 black SUVs surrounded the school, and when the principal saw who stepped out, his smile disappeared instantly. 14-year-old Jaden Carter was the kind of kid people noticed without really seeing. He was a quiet black boy who kept his head down, finished his work, and rarely got involved in school drama. He came to school every morning wearing clean but simple clothes, carrying an old backpack that had clearly seen better days. Sometimes, when his father was busy working, Jaden arrived in an old farm truck that made more noise than the newer cars in the parking lot. That was enough for some students to make assumptions. They saw the dusty boots in the back seat, the faded truck, and the smell of fresh soil on Jaden's jacket, and they decided they knew everything about him. "There goes the farmer's kid," one student joked whenever Jaden walked past. Another would laugh and ask if Jaden planned to spend his whole life playing with cows. Jaden usually ignored them. His father, Marcus, had taught him something important: never let someone else's opinion decide who you are. Marcus worked hard on their family farm from before sunrise until the sun disappeared behind the fields. To most people, he was simply a farmer. He drove an old truck, wore work boots, and rarely talked about money. But Jaden knew his father was proud of the life they had built, and he had never once heard Marcus complain about being underestimated. At school, however, not everyone showed Jaden the same respect. Principal Harrison was especially quick to judge him. The principal was a proud man who seemed to pay more attention to students with wealthy parents and expensive cars. He knew which families donated money to the school, which parents owned businesses, and which students came from important families. Jaden's name was never on that list. One Monday morning, Jaden walked into the main hallway carrying a folder for a science project. His shoes were dusty from helping his father before school, and there was a small tear on the sleeve of his jacket. Principal Harrison stopped him near the office and looked him up and down. "Jaden," he said with a smirk, "you need to start looking like you belong in a school like this." A few students nearby turned around. Jaden quietly looked at the floor. Then the principal added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Don't forget, you're just a farmer's son." The hallway went silent for a second before a few students laughed. Jaden tightened his grip on the folder, took a breath, and walked away without saying a word. Nobody knew why he wasn't angry. Nobody knew what his father had been preparing for. And nobody at that school had any idea that by the very next morning, 10 black SUVs would be waiting outside their doors. The next morning, Jaden thought the worst part of yesterday was over. He got to school early, placed his backpack beside his desk, and started working on his science project before the first bell rang. He was hoping to keep his head down and get through the day without another problem, but Principal Harrison had other plans. During first period, an announcement came over the speakers telling every student to report to the main auditorium for a special assembly. Nobody knew what it was about. When Jaden walked inside, he found hundreds of students filling the seats. Teachers stood along the walls while Principal Harrison stepped onto the stage with a microphone in his hand. He talked about success, hard work, and the importance of having big dreams. At first, Jaden thought the speech was actually going to be inspiring. Then the principal started talking about the students who came from strong families. He mentioned students whose parents owned companies, doctors' offices, restaurants, and law firms. The students he named smiled proudly as their classmates applauded. Then Principal Harrison looked toward Jaden. "And we also have students here who come from very different backgrounds," he said. Jaden immediately felt uncomfortable. He knew exactly where this was going. "Jaden Carter, stand up." Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. Jaden slowly stood. "Tell everyone what your father does," the principal said. Jaden hesitated for a moment before answering honestly, "He's a farmer." A few students laughed. Someone in the back whispered, "I knew it." Principal Harrison smiled as if Jaden had just proved his point. "A farmer," he repeated. "So your father works in the fields?" Jaden nodded. "Yes, sir." The principal looked around the room. "There's nothing wrong with honest work," he said, but his tone made it clear that he meant something very different. "Still, Jaden, you should understand that some people are simply born into opportunities that others will never have." More laughter came from the crowd. Jaden felt his face getting warm, but he refused to look down. He remembered his father's words from the night before, "Son, never be ashamed of honest work. The world needs people who know how to build something with their own hands." Jaden took a breath and looked directly at the principal. "My father taught me that a person's job doesn't tell you their worth," he said. The room became quiet. Principal Harrison's smile faded for a moment, then he laughed softly and said, "That sounds nice, Jaden, but this is the real world." Jaden sat down. The assembly continued, but he barely heard another word. What nobody knew was that Principal Harrison had just made a mistake that would soon reach far beyond the school walls. And the next morning, when 10 black SUVs rolled through the school gates, he would finally understand exactly how badly he had underestimated Jaden Carter and the man he called just a farmer. That evening, Jaden came home quieter than usual. He walked through the front door, dropped his backpack near the kitchen table, and went straight to his room without saying much. His father, Marcus Carter, noticed immediately. Marcus had a way of reading his son without needing many words. After working outside since before sunrise, his hands were covered with dirt, his boots were worn, and his old work jacket was hanging from one shoulder. He sat at the kitchen table and waited. A few minutes later, Jaden came downstairs. "Dad," he said softly, "do you ever feel bad when people look at you like you're nothing?" Marcus stopped what he was doing. He knew something had happened. Jaden told him about the assembly, about the students laughing, and about Principal Harrison calling him just a farmer's son. Marcus listened without interrupting. When Jaden finished, his father leaned back and gave a small smile. "Son, there are two kinds of people in this world," he said. "People who see what you have and people who see who you are." Jaden looked confused. Marcus stood up and walked toward the window overlooking their land. Their farm looked ordinary from the outside. There were fields, barns, tractors, storage buildings, and long rows of crops stretching toward the horizon. But there was something Jaden had never fully understood about the place. The farm wasn't simply a small family operation. Over the years, Marcus had quietly built a large agricultural business that supplied produce to grocery chains, restaurants, and food companies across several states. He owned multiple farms and warehouses, but he never acted like a wealthy businessman. He still drove the same old truck and worked beside his employees. Marcus believed success meant nothing if you forgot where you came from. "I could have bought a bigger house," he told Jaden, "a nicer truck, expensive clothes, all of it. But I wanted you to learn something money can't teach you." Jaden looked at him. "What?" Marcus smiled. "Character." He explained that his grandfather had started with almost nothing, working the land by hand. Every generation had built something bigger, but they had never forgotten the value of hard work. Marcus had purposely kept the family's success private because he wanted Jaden to experience life without people treating him differently because of his last name or his bank account. Jaden suddenly understood why his father never reacted when people called him just a farmer. Marcus wasn't embarrassed by the title, he was proud of it. Then Marcus placed his hand on Jaden's shoulder and said, "You don't need to prove anything to that principal. Let him believe whatever he wants." Jaden nodded. Neither father nor son knew that Principal Harrison's words had already set something much bigger in motion. Because the next morning, Marcus would finally have to step out of the shadows, and when he did, the entire school would discover that the quiet farmer they had underestimated was anything but ordinary. The next morning, Jaden walked into school determined to forget what had happened in the auditorium. He had listened to his father, and he didn't want one man's cruel words to control his day. He arrived early, placed his science project on the teacher's desk, and started reviewing his notes. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then his science teacher walked into the classroom, carrying a list of students chosen for the school's Young Leaders program. Jaden had worked hard for weeks hoping to be selected. His grades were strong, he helped other students with their work, and he had even stayed after school to help organize a community garden project. When the teacher began reading the names, Jaden waited patiently. Marcus Williams, Ethan Parker, Daniel Brooks. Several students smiled as their names were called. Then the teacher stopped. Jaden looked up. His name wasn't there. After class, he approached his teacher and politely asked if there had been a mistake. She looked uncomfortable. "Jaden, your application was one of the strongest," she said quietly, "but the final decision came from the principal's office." Jaden already knew what that meant. He walked down the hallway and knocked on Principal Harrison's door. "Come in," the principal said without looking up. Jaden stood in front of the desk. "Sir, I wanted to ask about the Young Leaders program." Principal Harrison finally looked at him. "What about it?" "My teacher said my application was strong, but I wasn't selected. I just wanted to know why." The principal leaned back in his chair. "Leadership isn't only about grades, Jaden. It's about presentation, confidence, and representing this school properly." Jaden understood the message. "So this is because of my clothes?" he asked. The principal didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "You need to understand that certain opportunities are meant for students who are prepared for them." Jaden looked at him for a long moment. "I am prepared," he said quietly. Principal Harrison shook his head. "You should focus on your studies and leave these things to students who have the right background." Jaden felt something inside him break, but he kept his voice calm. "Okay, sir." He turned around and walked out. Outside the office, 2 students had heard everything. One of them whispered, "He really doesn't like you." Jaden gave a small shrug. "Maybe he doesn't know me." What Principal Harrison didn't know was that the Young Leaders program was about to lose one of its biggest supporters. The school had been struggling financially for months, but most students had no idea. Several important donors were reconsidering their support because of how the school treated students and handled its leadership programs. Meanwhile, Marcus Carter had just received a call from the school board asking for an urgent private meeting. Marcus listened carefully, then looked across the farm fields through his office window. "So," he said quietly, "they're asking for help now." He paused. "I think it's time they learn something about judging people." And with that, Marcus made one decision that would bring 10 black SUVs straight to the school gates the very next morning. That evening, Marcus Carter was sitting alone in his office at the farm when his phone rang. It was almost 9 o'clock, and most of the workers had already gone home. Outside the window, the fields were dark except for a few lights near the barns. Marcus looked at the screen and saw a number he recognized. It was the school board chairman. He answered immediately. "Marcus, I'm sorry to call this late," the man said, "but we have a serious problem." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" The chairman explained that the school had lost one of its largest financial supporters. Another donor was preparing to leave as well. The school needed money for repairs, student scholarships, computers, and several programs that were already close to being cancelled. Marcus listened quietly. Then the chairman said something that made him pause. "We were hoping you might be willing to help." Marcus looked through the window at the farm. He had been watching the school from a distance for years. He knew how much the students needed a safe place to learn, and he had always believed that education was worth supporting. But he also knew what had happened to Jaden. "Before we talk about money," Marcus said, "I need to ask you something. How are students being treated at that school?" The chairman became silent. Marcus continued, "My son was publicly embarrassed there yesterday." The chairman immediately sounded concerned. "Jaden is your son?" Marcus didn't answer for a moment. He realized the board had no idea who Jaden's father really was. For years, Marcus had kept his business and personal life separate. He didn't want his son's teachers treating him differently because of money, but now that decision was changing. The chairman apologized and promised to investigate what had happened. Marcus agreed to meet with the board the following morning. Before hanging up, the chairman said, "If you decide to help us, Marcus, this could completely change the future of the school." Marcus gave a quiet laugh. "It could change more than that." After the call ended, Marcus sat in silence. He wasn't interested in embarrassing Principal Harrison. He wasn't looking for revenge. What bothered him was the lesson his son had been given, that some children deserved respect while others had to earn it because of their family background. Marcus remembered his own childhood, when people had underestimated him because he came from a poor farming family. He had spent decades building his company without forgetting those roots. He picked up his phone again and called his operations manager. "Get the team ready for tomorrow morning," he said. "We're going to the school." The manager asked, "How many vehicles?" Marcus looked out at the dark fields and thought for a moment. "Bring 10. The next morning, before most students even arrived, 10 black SUVs would turn into the school parking lot. And Principal Harrison would finally discover that the farmer he had looked down on was the man the school had been hoping to meet. The next morning started like any other school day. Students walked through the gates with backpacks hanging from their shoulders, teachers carried coffee into the building, and parents dropped their children off before heading to work. Nobody expected anything unusual. Jaden arrived early and went straight to his classroom, still thinking about everything that had happened with Principal Harrison. He had decided not to fight back or cause trouble. His father had told him to keep his character, even when other people failed to show theirs. But just after 8 o'clock, a security guard standing near the front entrance suddenly heard the sound of engines coming from the main road. He looked toward the gate and saw a large black SUV slowly turning into the school parking lot. Then another one followed, then another. Within seconds, more vehicles appeared behind them. 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5. Students near the windows started whispering. "What is going on?" someone asked. A teacher walked toward the glass doors and froze. The line of vehicles kept coming. By the time the 10th SUV entered the parking lot, the entire front of the school was surrounded by expensive black vehicles. Students rushed to the windows, trying to get a better look. Phones came out almost instantly. Nobody knew who was arriving or why so many vehicles were there. In the principal's office, Principal Harrison heard the noise and looked outside. His first thought was that some important government official or wealthy donor must be visiting. He quickly fixed his jacket and walked toward the entrance. "Everyone stay calm," he told the secretary, trying to sound confident. Outside, the doors of the SUVs began opening one after another. Men and women in professional business clothes stepped out. Some carried folders and briefcases. Then the door of the largest SUV opened. Marcus Carter stepped onto the pavement. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a clean dark jacket, simple trousers, and the same kind of work boots he wore every day on the farm, for a mom. For a moment nobody recognized him. Then one teacher whispered, "Wait, that's Jaden's father." The word spread through the crowd. Jaden's dad, the farmer. Principal Harrison stopped walking. His face changed immediately. He remembered the words he had spoken just days earlier, just a farmer's son. He suddenly wondered why a man he had treated like he was unimportant had arrived with 10 SUVs and a team of professionals. Marcus walked calmly toward the school entrance while students watched from behind the glass. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry either. He simply looked focused. As the doors opened, Marcus stepped inside. Principal Harrison stood directly in front of him. For several seconds, neither man said a word. Then Marcus looked at the principal and said calmly, "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. I believe we need to talk." The principal swallowed hard. He had no idea that the biggest lesson of his career was about to begin. Principal Harrison stood frozen near the school entrance as Marcus Carter walked toward him. The man he had dismissed as a simple farmer was now standing in front of him with a team of professionals behind him and 10 black SUVs visible through the glass doors. For a few seconds, Harrison couldn't find the right words. He looked at Marcus, then at the people behind him, and finally back toward the parking lot. "Mr. Carter," he finally asked. Marcus nodded. "Yes." Harrison forced a smile. "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting you." Marcus calmly replied, "I don't think anyone was." The school board chairman quickly stepped forward and greeted Marcus with a handshake. "Thank you for coming, Marcus. We really appreciate you making time for us." Harrison looked confused. "You two know each other?" The chairman gave him a strange look. "Of course we do, Mr. Carter has been supporting educational programs in this community for years." Harrison's face became serious. "Supporting?" The chairman nodded. "He is the person we have been trying to reach for months." The principal glanced at Marcus. "I'm not sure I understand." Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he handed a folder to one of his advisors. The advisor opened it and placed several documents on the table in the school lobby. They showed Marcus Carter Agricultural Group, a business with farms, warehouses, distribution centers, and contracts supplying food to major companies across several states. Harrison stared at the papers. He remembered the old truck, the work boots, the dusty clothes, the word he had used without thinking, farmer, but suddenly he understood that the word hadn't meant what he thought it meant. Marcus wasn't a struggling farmer. He was a highly successful agricultural businessman who had simply chosen to live modestly. The school board chairman explained that Marcus had agreed to provide major funding to keep several school programs alive. He would also help create new scholarships for students from families who couldn't afford expensive private programs. Harrison looked shocked. "You're the anonymous donor?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "I was." Then Marcus paused. "But I need to be clear about something. I'm not here because my son was embarrassed. I'm here because what happened to him showed me that this school needs to look at how it treats people." Harrison's face turned pale. He suddenly remembered the assembly. He remembered Jaden standing alone while students laughed. He remembered telling him to focus on students with the right background. Marcus looked directly at him. "You told my son he was just a farmer's son." Harrison swallowed. "I didn't know," Marcus interrupted gently. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know who he was and you decided his value anyway." The hallway became completely silent. Students watching from nearby suddenly understood that Jaden had never been the person who needed to prove himself. The man standing beside him was about to prove something far more important. Respect should never depend on money, clothing, or status. The hallway was so quiet that Jaden could hear the soft footsteps of students gathering behind the doors. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, but nobody wanted to be the first person to speak. Principal Harrison stood in front of Marcus Carter with his face full of regret. A few minutes earlier, he had been trying to impress Marcus, hoping to secure the financial support the school desperately needed. Now he was standing in front of the same man whose son he had embarrassed in front of hundreds of students. Marcus looked at him calmly and said, "I'm not here to make you feel small, Mr. Harrison. I'm here because my son deserves the same respect as every other student in this building." Harrison lowered his eyes. "Mr. Carter, I honestly didn't know who you were." Marcus nodded slowly. I know, and that is what concerns me. Harrison looked confused. Marcus continued, if you had known my son was the son of a wealthy businessman, would you have treated him differently? The principal didn't answer. The silence said everything. Marcus turned toward the school board chairman and said, that is the question this school needs to ask itself. Then Jaden appeared at the end of the hallway. He had been told to come to the office, but he had no idea why. When he saw his father standing beside the principal, he stopped. Marcus smiled at him. Come here, son. Jaden walked over slowly. Students watched as Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. This is my son, he said, the same boy who was called just a farmer's son. Jaden looked embarrassed, but his father continued. And yes, I am a farmer, I'm proud of that. I grow food, I employ people, I support families. There is nothing small about honest work. Several teachers nodded. One teacher quietly wiped a tear from her eye. Marcus then explained the truth about his business. He had built the Carter Agricultural Group over many years, starting with one small farm and expanding into a major agricultural company. But he had deliberately kept his wealth away from Jaden's school life because he wanted his son to be judged by his own character. I didn't want teachers or students treating Jaden differently because of my money, Marcus said. I wanted him to learn that respect should come before status. Then Marcus turned back toward Harrison. You had a chance to teach that lesson yesterday. Instead, you taught hundreds of children that wealth decides who deserves respect. Harrison finally looked at Jaden. I was wrong, he said quietly. I embarrassed you and I shouldn't have. Jaden didn't smile or celebrate. He simply said, I just wanted to be treated like everyone else. Those simple words hit the principal harder than anything Marcus could have said. Behind them, students began looking at Jaden differently, not because of his father's money, but because they finally understood the strength it had taken for him to remain respectful while everyone else was laughing. By the end of that morning, the story had spread through the entire school. Students who had watched Jaden get embarrassed in the auditorium were now talking about what they had witnessed in the hallway. But Marcus Carter wasn't interested in revenge, and he made that clear during the meeting with the school board. He sat at the long conference table with Jaden beside him, while Principal Harrison sat across from them, looking nothing like the confident man who had mocked Jaden only days earlier. The school board chairman opened the meeting by saying, we need to address what happened not only to Jaden, but to other students who may have experienced the same treatment. One by one, teachers began speaking. A counselor explained that several students had complained about being judged because of their clothes or family income. Another teacher admitted that some students were often given more attention because their parents were wealthy or influential. Then something unexpected happened. A student who had laughed during the assembly stood outside the meeting room and asked if he could speak. He told the board that he had laughed because everyone else was laughing, but afterward he felt ashamed. I thought being rich made someone better, he said. I was wrong. Jaden listened quietly. Principal Harrison finally stood up. He admitted that he had allowed his personal opinions to affect how he treated students. He apologized to Jaden and to the school staff. I judged a child before I ever took the time to know him, he said. That was wrong. The board chairman explained that an apology alone could not fix the problem. After reviewing the complaints and speaking with staff members, the board voted to remove Harrison from his position as principal while an official review was completed. He would no longer have authority over student leadership programs or disciplinary decisions. Marcus didn't celebrate when he heard the decision. Instead, he asked the board for something different. Don't just punish one person, he said. Change the system that allowed this to happen. He offered to continue funding the school, but only if the money was used fairly. He wanted scholarships for students from struggling families, better counseling services, updated classrooms, and a program teaching students about leadership and respect. The board agreed. A few weeks later, the school held a special ceremony. Jaden was invited onto the stage, but Marcus stood beside him. The principal's old words were still remembered, but now they carried a completely different meaning. Jaden was no longer known as the boy who had been mocked. He became known as the student who stayed respectful when others treated him unfairly. And Marcus made one final request to the board. Don't let my son's story be the only one. Make sure the next child who walks through these doors is judged by their character, not their clothes, their parents, or the money in their bank account. The room filled with applause. For the first time, the school understood the real lesson behind the 10 SUVs. They hadn't arrived to show off wealth. They had arrived to show what happens when people finally learn that respect belongs to everyone. Several months passed, and the school looked completely different. The old classrooms had new computers, The library had been renovated, and students who once worried about paying for school programs were now receiving scholarships. But the biggest change wasn't in the building. It was in the way people treated one another. Teachers began looking beyond expensive clothes and family names. Students who had once been ignored were being invited to join clubs, leadership programs, and school events. Jaden noticed the difference every day. He was still the same quiet 14-year-old boy who preferred working on his science projects and helping his father on the farm. He still wore simple clothes, still carried the same old backpack, and still rode in the same farm truck whenever Marcus came to pick him up. The difference was that nobody laughed anymore. One Friday afternoon, the school held a special ceremony to recognize students who had shown leadership, kindness, and courage throughout the year. Jaden's name was called near the end. He walked onto the stage as hundreds of students applauded. The principal's position had been filled by a new administrator, someone who had promised to make fairness one of the school's main values. Jaden received an award for student leadership, but when he stepped away from the microphone, he didn't talk about his father's business or the 10 SUVs. He talked about one simple lesson. "My dad taught me that you don't become important because people know your name," Jaden said. "You become important because of how you treat people when nobody is watching." Marcus sat in the audience, smiling proudly. After the ceremony, father and son walked toward the parking lot. Waiting there was the same old farm truck Marcus had driven for years. Jaden laughed when he saw it. "Dad, after everything that happened, you still drive this thing?" Marcus smiled. "Why would I change it?" Jaden shook his head. "I don't know." Marcus opened the truck door and said, "Because success isn't about showing people what you have, it's about knowing who you are." Jaden climbed inside and they drove away from the school together. As the truck disappeared down the road, a group of students watched from the front steps. One of them said, "That's Jaden Carter." Another smiled and replied, "Yeah, the farmer's son." But this time, nobody said it as an insult. They said it with respect. Marcus had never needed to prove that he was wealthy. Jaden had never needed to prove that he belonged. The 10 SUVs had only exposed a truth that had been there all along. People often judge what they can see because they are too impatient to discover what lies underneath. The boy they called just a farmer's son had walked through humiliation without losing his dignity. His father had answered disrespect without becoming disrespectful himself, and together they changed an entire school. Jaden would probably face people who underestimated him again someday. But now he knew exactly what his father had been trying to teach him. Your background doesn't decide your future. Your clothes don't decide your worth. Your family's job doesn't decide your value. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the very person who has the power to change everything. The farmer's son wasn't invisible anymore. He never had been.